But when you consider it just for a moment, you begin to see why so few things work out the way they should in this world. It is the forgetfulness of the egocentric I that born of desire that gives rise to the suffering. We consider the matter, the idea that the ego itself is a contraction of God. It is God and God only. But having generated the dynamic of contraction, sets in motion a chain of separate origination that causes proliferating obscuration. Not only is there a constant proliferating cause and effect, but we see that the terms of experience are constantly changing. Reality is not given to us by a specific set of terms. It is completely relative. Just visiting a quick moment, the scene of the mother suckling a child, eating a fish and throwing the bones to the dog. What one person would see and what a person with a perfect vision would see in the exact same situation. And we very quickly see the injustice of it. We live our lives, our hearts full of hope, full of love, looking for a reflection of that love in the world. Isn't that what we do? It really is very simple. That's all we do. Which is where we quickly see we need to have the courage of view, the courage of the warrior, the courage of the poet, to follow the truth where it will lead and not look away. It's important to grasp at this moment that born inside the contraction of God, that is I, the egocentric I, is of course a further and even more concealed contraction arising from the same impulsive I, and that is you. I and you are born of the same contraction. They're a subset of each other. This is very important to understand because this defines the trajectory of our incarnation. It defines the trajectory of our souls. We are either I or we're that. It would be simple enough if it was like a one-shot deal. And okay, this time I'm I. And a certain chain of events take place. And then, okay, it was over. I won. But it turns out that all of the definition, all of the activity of the I consciousness was defined by an underlying secret subset of definition that we would characterize as you. In other words, you select your polarity. And they're easily defined. A matter of, by example, the dynamic of the basic angels of our nature of behavior. When I is defined by jealousy, then I define you by a desire to possess you. You must do everything I want. And if you don't, I'm jealous. Or greed. If I is defined by greed, everything you have, I want. Anger. If I am angry with you, perhaps I want to hurt you. Perhaps I imagine some cause by which I want revenge. And that defines my action. It defines I and it defines you. Once I arises in jealousy, in revenge, in greed, we'll start with the dark ones, they're the famous ones. Then you are subtly defined. And you don't perceive yourself as you. You're only you to I. You experience yourself as I. And a very dynamic interchange takes place. Cause and effect, action, reaction. In this way we begin to see how your worst enemy ends up being a baby at your breast. That's how it happens. It happens all the time. I and you is a set. Think of it as a track. Let's flip to the opposite side. Love. But we can also see, very quickly we see that love has lots of stages to it. A lot of times what people call love is really jealousy, or really greed, or sexual attraction. Very powerful dynamics of cause and effect are set in motion. You could go so far as to say, this whole I-you thing, it's the reason there's men and women. Men and women are always getting together in some way or another, being attracted, being repulsed. And you see an entire dynamic psychology just in the observation of the psychology of attraction between men and women. They'll live out entire incarnations with such incredible intensity and force that in a following incarnation they'll switch sides, having become I so intensely, wanting to possess you. That very desire produces the effect. And it's even more complicated than that because it's not necessarily one for one. Cause and effect is not a one for one thing. Staying with the idea of attraction. We can have a very intense experience of attraction, A and B. And then the roles will flip sides. And this very powerful I-you relationship has been set in motion that must resolve itself. The problem is, desire-based activity will not produce a resolution because it insists on holding its own terms. If you start with the terms of I, you will hold the terms of I and not let go of them. And it's the possession of those terms that will produce a kind of solidity that will not allow the resolution to occur. And so rather than seeing two dissolving into one, you see a kind of attraction and repulsion like magnetic fields that sometimes attract and sometimes repulse. And so we begin to see this whole idea of a circle. But we also begin to see, because of the prismatic nature of the chain of origin, It's not necessarily straight across the circle, because we have these dynamics of consciousness, name and form, ignorance, sensory fields, contact, sensation, etc., each of which produce a prismatic effect in the dynamic of polar opposites. We also have a secondary tier of this kind of dynamic of equation of opposition, in that the original characters of A and B, either in jealousy or greed or anger or revenge or attraction, don't necessarily hold true back and forth, and the same parties play out the same issues. You can have a third party, a C party, that is like B, and can become a stand-in to A for B. In other words, B is not available. B is off on another karmic soul debt. So you find something else that's just like it. And you go, well, you begin to see this pattern recognition thing, the idea of the frontal, how the frontal lobe operates. Well, that's like what I liked, so I like this now. Or that's like what I hated, so I hate that now. And you see this incredible irrationality of behavior, born in this way. This happens all the time. When we begin to take all of this into consideration, the crazy scene with the mother, the child, the fish, and the dog makes more and more sense. We don't want it to be like that. And so you see this primal struggle in everybody's heart. Everybody feels love and has their terms for the fulfillment of that happiness. And they have a backlog of history of being I and being you. And the mind is like a supercomputer. And we begin to see that there are essentially two types of people in this world. People that want to know the truth at any price and refuse to look away. And those who want it on their own terms. Can't blame them. If you can get the truth on your own terms, I say go for it. But just between these two poles, and of course simplifying, to produce, make a point, leaves a lot of area for confusion. There are a few events in life, or let's call it existence, where the truth seems to be very, very pure, very present. At birth, at death, and at awakening. And we find it in little places within ourselves and in the world. It's what keeps us going.